Alright guys, welcome to our second video this week for the homework. This group is going to be on our higher powers. We only have quadratic and cubic in our examples, however you could have to the 5th power, to the 6th power, etc., etc. The key for this problem, I don't want you to be overwhelmed just yet. I want you to think back to solving our absolute value equations. And remember, we were trying to isolate the absolute value with the bars. And I'm going to kind of draw over this. Imagine that these are bars, like our absolute value. And we want to get that guy by itself. So once you kind of see that, hopefully you should see that we're going to add 5 to both sides first, and then divide by 3. And then I'm going to show you what we need to do with r squared. So this is going to be our goal. We are still trying to get y by itself, but in order to get to y, we need to get this guy by himself first. Okay, so just like we said, inverse, I'm going to add 5 to both sides. This guy cancels out. X plus 5 is equal to 3. Y minus 4. Quantity squared. Okay, so still not by himself. 3 divided by 3. X plus 5 divided by 3. If you want to turn that into fractions, you can, or reduce if you can. Now I have y minus 4 quantity squared. Okay, so since he is by himself, that whole quantity squared is by itself. I know the inverse of squaring, hopefully you remember, is taking the square root of both sides. And there's typically an unwritten 2 there, and that's what tells me to do the inverse of that. So this 2 and this 2 kind of cancel each other out. So let's say if you had to the 3rd power right here, instead of taking a squared root, there would be an equal sign. Let's say this was to the 3rd power. You would do the cubed root on both sides. If instead it was not the cube root, but the 5th power, you would do the 5th root on both sides because the goal is to cancel those out. Okay, so I'm going to go back to our original problem. Take us a second here. Okay, so now x plus 5 divided by 3, and that's the square root of that. Remember, since we don't have context, this is technically addition and subtraction. If we were talking about distance or something that we can measure, we typically only follow with the positive solution. And then this y minus 4 pops out. Okay. Now, one more step, trying to get y by itself. I'm going to add 4 to this whole thing. That cancels out. And now we can go a little bit further. So our whole solution is I'm going to take 4, positive and negative, x plus 5 divided by 3. Then outside of your square root, I'm going to add 4 is equal to y. You can write it so that 4 is in the front, and it would be 4 plus or minus the square root. Either way is acceptable. Sometimes we rewrite it that way because not all mathematicians like to start out with a plus or minus. But either way is acceptable.